There is a simple and effective way to improve your profitability and cash flow without having to raise your prices, employ more tradies or technicians, or even having to do more jobs. Yet the majority of business owners are not doing it. Tune into this episode where we tell you how you can potentially add an extra $10,000 plus in profit per tradesperson for very little extra effort. If you don't measure this and you don't understand it, you actually end up paying for no business benefit.
We often get so busy that we let profit really slip through our fingers.
This is about numbers, and the devil is in the detail, and it's just really exciting when you see businesses just making money back that really they could have been making anyway by concentrating on all these small variables that really add up to a big result.
Even there'll be some people out there, I'm not really in it for the money. I'm like, that's totally cool, but you can definitely make things easier and maximize other areas of your life. So we all should be looking at this.
I'll tell you what, they'll hurt when they don't have the money though.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's it. It doesn't matter what you're in it for. This is definitely going to help, whatever outcome you're after. So where do we start?
Alrighty, Tony Fraser-Jones here, the host of the Profitable Tradie podcast, hanging out with Phil Smith, co-host and all-round good guy.
All-round good guy, all right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, believe that.
Mate, you're
good
so
to be here.
Yeah, it's good to be here. I'm good to be here. We're all good.
Should we get into it?
Yeah, what goodness are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about how everyone wants to make more profit. Look, we often get so busy that we let profit really slip through our fingers. And like raising price is the simplest way to increase your profit, but there's another simple way to dramatically increase your profit without having to employ more techs or put your prices up or even do any more jobs. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and I think that your point there that we let profit slip through our fingers is a big one, and it's really this simple. You have to pay your tradespeople or your technicians, for every hour that they're on the payroll, and it's absolutely critical that you maximise the billables from those hours for each tradie or technician. And there's a lot of times where we're not doing that, which is causing us to lose potential profit, and the impact can be enormous. And so maybe the way to sort of dig into this is just to look at some really quick numbers, because this is about numbers, and the devil is in the detail, and it's about stopping small losses that add up over a long period of time. So if you think about a tradesperson or a technician, if you employ them, you pay them for 40 hours a week. Now that's pretty standard. And so we want to make sure that we charge out as much of that 40 hours a week as we can. And let's say 35 hours are chargeable. So 5 hours are not chargeable, which would be 87.5% chargeability, if you like. And we call that our labour utilisation. It's, how much of the labour are we actually getting back? It's not productivity. That's another whole question. That's, how quickly we get through the work. And that's another whole topic, which is an important one, of course. But if you think about that particular example, you've lost 5 hours a week in chargeable time. Now, let's say your cost of labour, say you're paying $40 an hour. We'll just keep it really simple, $40 an hour. So it's cost you $200, 5 times 40. So that hurts a little bit, obviously. And if you multiply that over a number of weeks, obviously that adds up. But the real kicker here is the opportunity cost, because you've got your charge-out rate, which is what is really important here. And so let's say that was $90, just as an example. You haven't charged out $90 5 times, so that's $450 that you've actually lost in potential revenue. And say if you added that up for 45 weeks, that's $20,250. That's where it gets really juicy and really exciting. So there's a lot of money on the table. And let's say you had a kind of a small business. You got 5 techs. So 5 techs at $20,250 is over $100,000 and lost revenue because you haven't maximised the chargeability of your team. And so there's just a massive opportunity for businesses, and we see it all the time in the people that we help.
Yeah, massively. So, I think no question that there's opportunity on the table here, and if we can, raise that labour utilisation, it's money for jam. And I'm sure you have a story to maximise this point.
I do. I'm a huge fan of yachting, and in particular America's Cup. There's been some America's Cup happening recently, and these boats in this race, if you haven't seen it, you should Google it. Like it's cool stuff. They are these foiling monohulls. They're 75 foot long, and they can do speeds of up to 40 knots. They can literally sail 4 times faster than the wind. It's insane. Anyway, small digression. But what fascinates me about this is the way that these teams, they maximize all the little details on these boats. And the winning teams, it's not just about having a fast boat. It's about having a great design boat. It's about having the right sails. It's about having a weather team that are on top of everything. It's about having the fittest sailors. It's about having the right tactics. All of that stuff comes together to make a great fast boat, a fast package. And it's like maximizing all the variables. And this is the same thing when making profit in your business. And particularly when we're looking at the labour utilisation, the amount of time you charge out, it's looking at all the small individual details, which when you add them up over the course of a week and then a month and then a year, have an incredible effect on the profitability of your business. And it's just really exciting when you see businesses just making money back that really they could have been making anyway by concentrating on all these small variables that really add up to a big result.
Yeah, massively. So, I mean, I think in this case, if we can maximize those variables, we are on. We got some good stuff happening. But, if we don't measure things like our labour utilisation, we can't do that and we run into some problems.
We do. And I think the first thing which is super frustrating is that if you don't measure this and you don't understand it, you actually end up paying for no business benefit. You're paying your team for hours that are accruing no benefit to the business. And that's just not good business because your team, and I don't mean to say that your team are a factory, like, yeah, they're not human, they are obviously, but your technicians and your tradespeople, when you own a contracting or a tradie business, are kind of like your factory. They're your productive unit. And so you wouldn't have a factory, if you think about it, that wasn't operating 40 hours a week. You wouldn't just shut it down for 5 hours a week and not do work that you could make money out of. That just wouldn't make sense.
Yeah.
And so the same here, and ultimately you make less profit in cash. You're not going to generate as much money. Then it becomes the struggle street that everyone has when they have low cash flow. There's the growth is hard. There's the whole anxiety and frustration about how am I going to pay people. There's the fear of am I going to be able to make payroll and keep going. And it's just really, really challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. But on the other hand, if we start measuring this, we've got some big opportunities on that.
Well, you just increase your return on investment on that productive unit, which is your team. You get better return on investment on your wages. You can make more profit in cash, and it's kind of money for jam, as you said, and that puts your business on a really solid financial footing. And when that happens, you just feel better about the whole thing. I mean, there's no doubt in business, an extra $50,000 or $100,000 helps with everything.
Yeah.
It just puts you in a more confident mood. You can do more stuff, and you feel on the front foot, which is what it's all about.
Yeah, and that's always true as well. Like even if you get another 100,000, trust me, another 100,000 would make it easier again. Even there'll be some people out there that, not really in it for the money. I'm like, that's totally cool, but you can definitely make things easier and maximize other areas of your life. So we all should be looking at this.
I'll tell you what, they'll hurt when they don't have the money though.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's it. It doesn't matter what you're in it for. This is definitely going to help. Whatever outcome you're after. So where do we start?
I guess the first thing is really clearly understanding what it is, and I think we've explained that is labour utilisation is how much do we charge out relative to what we pay our, the hours we pay our team for. And so the ideal is if you're paying them for 40 hours a week, you're charging out 40 hours a week. I mean, some people can get quite creative, and sometimes they can go over 100% if they've got lots of maintenance and service work, and they can back jobs on top of each other. So that's really the concept. But I think there's a real mental shift that's required here. In terms of how you look at your business and how you feel about the value you provide and your understanding in money. And the shift for me is understanding that there's three people who can pay for your team's time. There's you, there's the clients, or your team. Now, we know the team doesn't want to pay for their time. They're not going to want to go and do stuff for free.
No, absolutely not.
And I know it's tempting when they make a mistake. You really feel like making them do it for free because it's you're copping it on the chin. You can pay for it, which is what happens when you don't charge out the work. The business ends up paying for this time, or the clients pay for it. And really, that's what should be happening to the greatest extent possible, because the reason you have tradespeople is because you need them to do a job for your clients.
That's right. I think just on that, if I could add to it, mate, is like, a lot of the time, we might feel bad about it. There's a lot of sort of feelings of, I don't know if it's the best thing to do, especially, if this is due to my own making in any way, then maybe I should wear the consequence. But the reality is like actually every business does this. Every business. Like you pay for all the downtime. If there is downtime in a factory, for example, like let's say a factory's churning out Nike shoes. If there's downtime in that factory, like trust me, that's factored into the margin in those shoes. Like absolutely. So the end user is paying for it. And so it doesn't matter what the business is. It's actually crucial to that business's survival that they're not copping things like this on the chin. And it's crucial to your survival as well. So, it doesn't matter what kind of way you feel about that. Like the end user must pay for all of your expenses, including things like downtime, or otherwise your business is not going to survive and they won't be able to get those kinds of services again. So, really it's in the end user's best interests to keep you afloat, or otherwise what happens to, you know, that service or that, you know, that sort of thing that you can provide, because you wouldn't exist and neither would anyone else. So you can't cop this stuff. You actually can't. Doesn't matter how you feel about it. So you must toughen up in your mindset here. It's really important.
Yeah, I think that toughening up is the key thing, and it's like no freebies. Like, I know it's easy when you feel a little bit bad for a client, or you've got to take, you know, extra trips to the merchant to get something, or the supplier, or some travel's involved, or they just, you know, you're out in the field on a job and they're like, oh, can you just look at this, and you kind of don't charge it, or you miss a variation, or you think it doesn't count. You've got to account for every hour that you'd spend out there. And you might think that this one doesn't count because it's an hour, but if you do it once, you're doing it 10, 20, 30, 40, 100 times a year. And that's where the problem is. This is how it layers up. And so the devil is in the details. It's like 15 minutes per day, equals 75 minutes per week, equals 3,900 minutes per year. And that's 65 hours.
Yeah, it's not insignificant.
It adds up really quickly. And so that's why the people who really make great margins are across this like a rash, because they're just maximizing all those details, which increases the charge out rate, increases the revenue, increases the profitability. You just have to make sure that you charge for everything humanly possible, and you're tough about it, because, like you said, you're providing a service. The reason you exist is to provide this service. It's not like you should do stuff for free for the client.
No, absolutely not. I mean, they're the one that wins at the end of the day, right? They get the job done that they wanted done, and that's all that matters. So I think the very first thing with this, if you want to get it right, is you absolutely have to track it. And I think this is where, honestly, most people fall over. They say, oh, it's so hard to track this, or I really need to get all the right information and I just don't get it, or, I'm going to have to spend all this time, sitting there and looking over these numbers. And I'm like, yes. But as we've looked at, I mean, the amount of money that you can, recover by doing this is massive. And it absolutely is a must of running your business. You need to be across this. And so tracking it means, collecting the information, keeping track of A, how many hours you are paying your guys per week, and B is how many of those hours were able to be billed to the client. And then obviously, as you're looking at that, I'd look at it on a weekly basis is probably the best time frame. Obviously, you collect data with every job, but looking at it weekly is good. And you want to look at the trend there. So not just looking at a week randomly and then throwing it away. You look at week to week to week to week. How are we going? Are we trending up? Are we trending down? Do we have any outliers? How can we bring up the averages? And so you're looking at this weekly and you're reviewing it and you're interrogating the numbers that are there. So obviously, for this to work, you really, really need accurate jobbing information. You can't track something you don't have. It's that simple. So, with this, it's, job or time cards for every job, so that whenever a job's done, how much labor actually went into that job. So which people were on it, how many hours did they spend on that job. And you also need to know what materials were used on that job. And so this is really, really important. Some people do this really well. Other people are a bit slack, honestly. I think I kind of used about this much cable. I'm like, no, you need to know. I think I used about this many fittings. I'm like, no, you need to know. And I think, John was there for a day. I'm like, well, what does a day mean? Was it 6 hours? Was it 7 hours? Was it 8 hours? And how many of those did we actually bill back to the client? So you need really accurate information from every job so that you can actually start to track this week to week. Obviously, for that, software is going to help massively. So if you've got the right software, job management software such as, like Simpro, Service Titan, Service Fusion, Fergus, you look at Aeroflow, there's heaps of them. And they all do a pretty good job. But you've got to get one that's right for you and you've got to use it, because otherwise it's going to be really, really hard. You're going to have spreadsheets everywhere and, numbers all up the wazoo, little post-it notes and pieces of paper and stuff like that. If you use a good software, this becomes a lot easier and it will crunch those numbers for you. So you can input the data from the jobs and then, it'll actually do all of the reporting for you. And so it takes a lot of the time back off your plate again. So using software is really, really important. And it's possible to do this with spreadsheets, absolutely. But it's all about, how much time and efficiency can you create by using the right softwares here and actually, getting some help from technology, really.
Yeah, I think a lot of people listening, if you listen, you might have some software, field software already, job management software. In that case, And if your guys, your girls are actually time stamping when they go on the jobs, then this information will be there already. Just most likely you're not looking at it yet, and so this job is relatively easy. But if you don't have that, look, use a spreadsheet. You know how many hours you pay for them. Just work at how many hours they've spent on jobs, and that'll be a good start. And I think the thing here is this. This always buzzes me out, right? You look at this and you see, actually, on average, we've got 33 out of 40 hours that we're actually charging. And then the next step in that process is you look at it and you're like, okay, 7 hours. Well, anyone will look at that and say, well, where are those 7 hours? And so you start this process of investigation. And so you might see, oh, actually, there's a bunch of travel time I see that's not been invoiced there. Or, oh, look, there's some downtime in the yard. Or actually, we go to the workshop every morning and we spend 45 minutes mucking around in the morning.
Yeah, guys doing their makeup.
Yeah, doing their makeup, whatever. And so you'll start to dig down into the details of figuring out what's actually not being charged. Whereas before, everyone looked busy, stuff was happening, people were coming and going, but you really didn't have any transparency or granularity, if you like, on what the hell was actually happening. And as soon as you start measuring it, magic will start to happen. And you'll be like, flippin' heck. You'll be like someone, gave you a shot, because you'll get kind of grumpy about that.
Yeah.
And you'll start making some changes because you'll be like, geez, this is crazy.
And I think often those changes are actually a lot simpler to make than we think. Like, we think, how can I possibly charge out time that didn't get used? And it's not about making shit up. It's just actually about, looking at these opportunities. And often there are some very, very simple changes that we can make to bring those averages up. So should we dive into those?
Let's do it. Well, the devil's in the detail. I mean, a real simple example is job cards or time cards. You track it, you can improve it, and we've had a bunch of people, their teams are a bit slow or a bit slack at doing their job information, and so they might do them at the end of the day. Some of them do them at the end of the week, which is a nightmare because you can't remember what happened.
Nah, and all the little 15 minutes get rounded up to the hour or rounded down to the hour.
That's right.
You get a lot of overs and unders.
But they spend an hour or maybe more doing their paperwork,
which actually decreases the labour utilisation.
which is not billed anywhere.
Yeah,
They're like, this is just like dead time.
Yeah.
And so an easy fix there is that the policy in your business is that all time cards, job cards are completed before you leave the job.
Yeah.
And that way that time gets billed to the client, because it should be, because you're doing the job card for that client's job.
Yeah.
It's not going to add much. It might be 10 minutes, if that. So they get their photos, they put the materials, all that sort of stuff on there. So that's really simple.
It's super simple.
And obviously it gets you better information as well as getting the time billed somewhere. So that's one. Maybe planning your material purchases is another big one to minimise the time with suppliers. Now, don't get me wrong. If you're going to a supplier, you're going for a job, so you should probably charge that time to the job.
Absolutely.
But sometimes you might be stocking vans or whatever that is not directly attributable to your job. Well, can you get the supplier to bring the materials to you? Is there a way that you can stop people having downtime, spending time at the merchant, at the supplier, getting stuff or talking to their mates or having something to eat and a Coke or a V or a energy drink or whatever it is, which can easily eat up half an hour 2 or 3 times a week.
Yeah, absolutely.
So minimising those trips to the suppliers can be an incredibly powerful way of actually tightening up this labour utilisation.
Yeah, well, you're never probably going to stamp out trips to the supplier, but if you can minimise them and minimise the time spent while there, then this is a huge win. It's so much time, and charge it back. So, and again, next one is if you're planning your schedules as well to reduce that time out to the workshop. That's really, really important as well. And when I say this, I mean like your workshop, where you're based. So if you can plan your schedules to, mean that people don't have to come, to the workshop first and then drive all the way back in the same direction and backpedal past their house to get to site. It's like they could just go straight to site in the morning. They don't have to come to the workshop first. It's, a really easy way to go. And especially if, they've picked up the materials for their job, if they're going to be delivered to site or they've picked them up, at the end of the previous day or something like that, they don't need to come to the workshop first. Now, this is really important because firstly, you save the time spent in transit getting to and then back from the workshop. But secondly is what happens when people get into the workshop in the morning? The first thing they do is make themselves a coffee, right? Then they chat with your office staff, being social. And this is cool, but it is, sucking up time. Then they're like, well, I just had a coffee. And you know what happens after your morning coffee?
I know what happens to you.
Yeah, well, what happens to me after a morning coffee is I make a little trip to the toilet. And I'm sure this is a pretty universal truth. So, at that point, you're actually getting to a stage where I arrived at the workshop and then I'm not even leaving again for at least half an hour. If Tony's on the toilet, then it could be even longer. But
that's very unfair. It's like the pot calling the kettle.
Anyway, my point is like you've got a serious amount of downtime there that actually wasn't just them coming to pick up materials for the job or figure out what they're doing for the day. And this is very easy to communicate, over any of your other communication ways, like email, messenger chats, WhatsApp, whatever. Like, if people don't know where they're going, I'm like, we have a problem. Or maybe your schedule's not clear, or it's not on your job management stuff, whatever, but there are so many ways to get around them having to come in the morning, and it really does save a ton of time in A, travel, and B, muck around in the workshop.
The thing here is, let's say you have a team of 10 people, tradespeople or techs. That's 10 half hours each morning. So that's 5 hours every day.
5 hours.
25 hours
time.
every week.
Absolutely.
It's a massive amount of money that's just been burnt, which could be saved through better organisation.
Yeah, definitely.
There's a lot of ways this can be improved, and some of it will depend on your situation. But a really cool one is we had a member who lived in a rural area, and so to fill up the vans with petrol and diesel, would take a little bit of time. People have to travel to the servo, and they'd muck around, and so he got fuel at the workshop.
Yeah, set it up like a little gas station.
Well, a little gas station at the workshop where the vans and the trucks could be filled there, which saved a bunch of time.
And actually, ironically, the gas station who he'd partnered with to set it up used to come and fill up the gas for him, and they did it all like for basically no cost, because it meant that they exclusively used that gas station for X amount of vans. So it was actually like it was very easy for him to set up and very cost effective, and it saved a ton of time.
Yep. And that meant more time billable.
Absolutely.
More time billable is the key here.
Not to mention, little side thing is that he also got a discount on the gas because
Nice.
again of the exclusive use. That was cool. Again, next one, charge for your travel time. Now, this is really, really important, because the reality is, for me to get to the job is part of the job, right? Like, that is part of the job. And so I think a lot of the time this comes back to that toughen up mindset, where people are going to think, I can't charge for that. I'm not working on their job. But I'm like, well, the only way for me to work on your job is to get to your site. So that is actually, accredited to that job, and you have to charge for it. And so there's lots of ways you can do that, but charging for travel time is crucial. So you either build this into your pricing, or, if you have a large catchment area, then, you might have different zones that pay different amounts of travel. Things like service fees, which we'll dig into in a second, they can cover that as well. But one way or another is like, you have to be able to charge for that travel time, because it is part of the job. You don't teleport there. You don't end up there by magic, so the reality is, in order to get this job done, I have to charge for getting there. It's that simple. And then as far as me getting from this job to the next job, well, the next job pays for me getting to that one, and so on and so forth. And then that way, every job pays for you to get there, and that covers a lot of downtime, especially if you live in a big place, or you have a large catchment area, or even if you're, the area you service is not that big, but there's a ton of traffic.
Same thing, isn't it?
It's the same thing. It's all about us wasted a bunch of downtime getting from A to B, and so if you can charge for that, then again, that's super important for your margins.
Yeah, and service fees are important. That's the price people pay for you providing the service, and that can be like $170 for showing up for the first 30 minutes. Doesn't include any materials, and that really helps to keep that labour utilisation really, really tight.
Yeah, absolutely. So, getting them from there, I think in order to make any of this work, it's really, really important that you have good operations management.
I think this is the key, what we're really driving it, isn't it?
Yeah, because I think there's a lot of things here, like when you start tracking your labour utilisation, you're looking at these numbers, you're looking at your job cards, looking at the trends, and you're starting to see some of the reasons why you have all this downtime. At that point, you need to be able to actually action change to make these things come right. And this is where operations management is massive, especially if you have a team. If it's just you out there, or you and one other guy, and they tag along in your truck or whatever, then that's fine. You're in relative control of this. There's things, that levers you can pull. But as your team gets bigger, this becomes, more things to keep track of, more behaviors to drive, more stats to collect. It's more things to look at, and this is where operations management comes in. It's absolutely critical. So a lot of the time what we find is that as teams grow, this tends to slip. So either you're the one who's running operations for your team as it grows, or you've got an operations manager in, and then they're running their team. But eventually, either you or your operations manager is going to get pretty tapped out for time. There's a lot to do, a lot on your mind. And keeping track of these small details tends to fall down the priority list. And when that happens, you lose a lot of opportunity, and actually it's very, very detrimental to your business. So I think it's making sure that the operations manager or yourself is really prioritizing looking at these details, because as we said, that's where the devil lives, and then actually spending real time on it. And the other thing is, looking at all of the way that they can coordinate that team. So, scheduling is crucial here. If you're scheduling effectively, people going straight to site, going from one job to a job that's close to it to a job that's close to it, the succession of which jobs you go to is really important. Who goes to what jobs, so then that way you can, best utilize, the distances people are traveling and how easy it is for them to get there. All of these things are considerations that a good operations manager can make to actually minimize downtime in your schedule, not to mention having some backup jobs waiting in the wings to fill any gaps. So, if a gap does arise, and you have a job which is waiting to get done that you can just quickly slot in, then awesome, that's great. And so having a few of those on your roster that you can just pop in is obviously going to be super helpful as well. It's all about tightening that schedule as much as possible, and this is what good operations management will do.
Yeah, and if I jump back to the sailing story, is once these monohulls are actually sailing, and they sail on foils, like they're not even in the water, they're like bloody airplanes, they fly, is right throughout that race, all the time, the helmsman is trimming the sails and changing the direction of the boat to maximize the performance at all times. Like these sails are always being shifted to catch the wind, always looking for wind shifts, all those little details that make up for great performance. And that's really what you're driving at. And it's understanding things like, look, if you've got some projects on, your contractors or your clients will let you down sometimes, and there will be a hole. You've got to expect that. That's part of the nature of the business. Someone won't be ready for you to go and pipe out the house or fit off the electrical work or whatever it is. That's going to happen, and that's where good operations manager has that backlog of jobs which are planned and ready to go to slot in. That's what we mean by hour, day by day. Management of that is how you drive the labour utilisation, which then drives the profitability, which makes you a very happy camper.
Yeah, the operations manager is also going to be the one who's keeping the team accountable to actually doing those little things that are going to make a difference, like getting your job cards filled in on site before you leave the job. That's a behavior that can slip. Maybe they do it for a bit, but maybe after a week or two, they've fallen back into bad habits. They're doing it at the end of the day again, and then now it's blown out to the end of the week. The operations manager is going to be the person who's, holding the team accountable to those good behaviors as well. So, it's the scheduling, it's pulling everything together in a tighter way. It's better organization of materials for the guys, and it's also the accountability for those behaviors that the guys need to own themselves. But someone needs to be in charge of it, or otherwise everyone's just running around doing their own thing, and it gets a little bit like the inmates are running the asylum. And that's honestly where slippage happens, and that slippage is extremely costly to your business. And on the other hand, if you don't get the slippage, you not only save the cost, but you get the benefit as well. So you actually win twice. And that's where this is such an important role.
And just back to the theme here is that the slippage on a day or even a week is not that dramatic, but you multiply it by weeks and months and years. It's just hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars for most businesses. And that's often why businesses don't get to where they want to, because they're just letting that profit slide through their fingers.
Absolutely, which brings us to precedents and standards. So the thing is like when you let something go once, you set a precedent, meaning that you're going to let it go again. Like the minute there's a precedent, it's like you might have every intention not to let that same thing go again, but you have a precedent. And so the problem is that when you're under the pump and things are difficult, it's like, well, I've already decided that it's only 15 minutes. And so another only 15 minutes goes by that same principle because it's a precedent. Whereas if you have a standard, it's a line in the sand, like I'm absolutely never going to let time be uncharged. Then that's a standard, and there is no crossing that threshold. And that's where you start to get real results, is when you stop letting precedents happen and you start setting standards instead.
Yeah, and speaking of standards, benchmarks are really important here. So if you're listening, you might be thinking, well, where should I be aiming? Well, the first thing, as I would say, is you measure where you are now, and anything improvement on that is good. Yep. So get a standard for where you are now, and then we look to improve that. But as a general rule, a benchmark of 95% is something really, really good to aim for. It might vary a little bit depending on the type of work you do, but 95% means 95% of the time you're charging out your team's hours. And that if you hit that consistently, you're going to get a pretty good result in your business. So that's definitely something to aim for. But don't be stressed out if you're not hitting that straight away when you measure it. Just measure where you are now. And if you're at 80% or 75%, a lot of people are when they start measuring this. 85% is going to be a great improvement. You'll see a lot of cash. And if you're at 85, 90% is going to be a great improvement.
Yeah.
And then work your way up to that 95%.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I think the thing is even if I was above 95%, I'd still be pushing for better, because honestly, it's those small wins that can get you going. And you might think I'm above 95%, so I've only got a couple percent here I can win. That's actually still untrue. You can have better than 100% labour utilisation, because someone could be paid for 40 hours in a week, but I've managed to charge out 42 hours, especially when you have things like service fees. So, if I have a service fee which says, it's going to be X amount, maybe $150 plus GST, and that's going to cover the first half hour of the job and doesn't include materials. Any time over and above that's going to be charged extra. You okay with that? Customer says yes, and then your tech turns up and they've just blown a fuse and you flick it back on. It's still $150 for the service fee, and he scoots off after that. He was there for 10 minutes, but we've charged half an hour, because that was what's included in the service fee. And so actually, like, you can still improve. So don't get to 95% and then say job done. You always got to be looking for these opportunities, because the devil is in the details, and the wins are there too. So I think it's massive. So shall we land this plane?
Let's do it. Maximising your labour utilisation, or the amount of tradesperson or tech's time that you charge out, is one of the best levers for improving the profitability in your business. Now, track it with laser-like focus every week, and you'll see significant shifts in your profitability. Thanks heaps for listening. We'll catch you all again next time.
See you later.
Congratulations on being part of a select group of savvy business owners who are taking their businesses to the next level. And to help you on your journey, don't forget to check out our show notes for a copy of our free book, The Profitable Tradie, and other valuable resources. Thanks for being a part of this special group, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Profitable Tradie podcast.